Chamomile Seltzer. Hello, dudes, dudettes, duders, and everyone in between. In this video, we'll be talking about the GoStream Duet, the new video switchboard from Osee. The Duet is an iteration on their original GoStream, with the biggest change being the inclusion of 4 SDI inputs in addition to the 4 HDMI inputs. While the GoStream takes many of its design cues from the ATEM line of switchers, it stands on its own as a feature-rich, well-built video switcher. In this video, we'll go over the core functionality of the GoStream, including an overview of the inputs, outputs, phase controls, and menu system, and then we'll discuss how it fits into a live production pipeline. Like the ATEM, this device has a simple interface with a lot more going on under the hood. So, as we cover our opinions of the device, we'll also be demonstrating how to use it. The intention of this review is to give you enough information not just to get you started, but to spark creativity. And look, there is no way around it. We're going to be comparing the GoStream Duet to the ATEM Mini. Like, a lot. I mean, on the surface, they're almost the exact same device, right down to the font on the buttons. That said, the GoStream does a lot to distinguish itself from the ATEM. It's not enough to replace our ATEM outright, but it will very likely become a permanent piece in our live stream kit. Just maybe not how you think, and we'll get into all of that later. To understand how it would fit into your production pipeline, it would be best to talk about what the GoStream Duet is. It's an all-in-one live switching device that takes 5 inputs, or 4 depending on what you consider to be an input, and can deliver the cut as a webcam via USB-C, as an HD signal via HDMI, as a video file recorded to an onboard SD card, or as a live stream via the Ethernet out. And it has a T-bar. There are hundreds of features and settings you can adjust beyond that, more than we could possibly cover in one video, and we'll be focusing on what you need to know about the device to get a show up and running. Finally, Osee provided us with the board for review purposes. No money exchanged hands, and they have no editorial control over this review. And I doubt I will ever drink chamomile seltzer again. Let's talk about input and output. The GoStream has so many inputs and outputs that some of them have been exiled from the rear panel to the side panel. On the back, you'll find 4 HDMI inputs. There are 2 HDMI outports, and by default, these are set to program on HDMI 1 and multi-view on HDMI 2. These can be changed inside the menu along with stream, which is the term Osee uses for what it outputs. Most typically, your stream will be your program, but you can change it if necessary. HDMI 1, 2, and stream can be changed by going to Menu, Settings, Outsource. If you aren't able to change HDMI 2's signal though, make sure you've updated your firmware to at least 2.1.0, but please be careful. Your onboard menus are only available in the multi-view. If neither of your HDMI outputs are set to multi-view, you need to be connected to a computer to do menu level changes on the board. This feature/glitch really jumped out at us because the ability to control every setting of the board from the board is one of the most distinguishing features that the GoStream has over the ATEM. So when we switched HDMI out 2 to preview instead of multi-view and immediately lost the ability to control the board without connecting to a computer, it was deeply felt. Connecting to a computer is fairly easy to do. This is done through one of the 2 USB ports on the back of the device. USB 1 functions as your webcam out and is used when plugging into a computer. USB 2 accepts a webcam in, which is an interesting, if potentially limiting, use of the port. And this is where the hemming and hawing begins with this device regarding how many inputs the switcher actually has. There is an auxiliary input on the board, and that can be set to webcam in or used for playing back video files from your SD card. If you call the GoStream a 5-input switcher because you're using aux as a 5th camera, you're right, it's a 5-input switcher. If you call it a 4-input switcher because it has 4 inputs that can be set to either HDMI or SDI, you're also right. It's a 4-input switcher. Everybody's right. Let's get back to those USB ports. USB 2 functions as your webcam in, but it can also take an SSD for live stream recording and video playback. This functionality is only available from 2.1.0, so if your GoStream isn't able to use external SSDs, make sure you have the latest firmware. Moving along, we've got the Ethernet port, which allows you to stream directly from the Osee. There are also 2 mic inputs which can be set to line level or mic level and a headphone jack. That completes the tour of the rear panel. But there is one huge problem back there, and it's one that makes me feel that this board might not be field ready. The labels of the ports are molded into the plastic on the GoStream, not painted on like they are on the ATEM. This might sound like a minor issue, but even under regular light, the labels are incredibly hard to read, becoming absolutely useless in low-light environments, which is where 99% of our broadcasts are. When we're in the studio doing solo streams or live edits, poor legibility like this is not really that big a deal because we have looser schedules and fewer eyes on the production team. If you've done broadcasts under the watchful eye of a paying client, though, you know that you do not want to slow down a live show because you can't read the inputs on your switcher, even if it's for 45 seconds. Finally, on the side, you have 4 SDI inputs. Now, this is a 4-input switcher, not 8. Each input can be set to either HDMI or SDI independently of the others. Although you can switch between them while the board is in operation, you are going to see a slight hiccup as the input turns over. So assume you should be cutting to something other than the input you're changing when you change it. There is a bit of I/O on the front, and that's the SD card slot. This is used for saving and loading board states, recording the program out of your edit as it's happening, or playing back video files as the auxiliary input. If you're playing video files from the card, you lose the webcam in, as your auxiliary input can only be set to one option at a time: video playback or USB in. Also, this board does not record isolated inputs, just the final edit or whatever else you have your stream set to. The face panel. There is a lot going on with the face panel. Up first is the power button, which shouldn't warrant comment but does thanks to the ATEM's lack of an on-off function. Below that is a single button to start and stop streaming. From there, we're going to break the buttons down by group and then explore the functionality in each group. On the GoStream, you have controls for audio, macros, menu, recording and playback, sources, and transitions. Finally, there's that T-bar. Let's look at each group in a bit more detail. Source buttons. The GoStream has 7 possible sources when cutting, 8 depending on how you count them. There are 4 camera inputs, 2 stills, 1 auxiliary input, and a Supersource. The auxiliary can be set to video playback from an SD card or SSD drive and pull signal from the USB in. Just a quick little correction: since we recorded the narration, Osee has announced that NDI will come standard on the GoStream Duet and not require a licensing fee, and you're actually seeing this reflected in the menu already. This USB in is expecting a webcam signal, which is exactly what the ATEM puts out. We tried plugging the ATEM in via USB, and sure enough, it worked fine. I don't think it's a configuration we'd ever use in the field, but if you want to add 8 more input channels to your GoStream, or if somebody bet you that you couldn't Rule 34 the ATEM line of switchers, this would be worth exploring. These sources can be loaded as previews or cut between directly. Having a bottom row of buttons for preview and a top row of buttons for cut is a more traditional system of live switching than what you find on the ATEM minis. And this layout decreases the chances of an accidental button mash, something we find a bit too common on the ATEM line of switchers. Also, the buttons on the GoStream feel like they require a bit more weight than the ATEM buttons, which is much appreciated. I can't tell you how many times the weight of a relaxed finger was enough to create an unwanted cut on the ATEM. Let's move on to transition controls. While a direct cut is what most live editors will be using the majority of the time, there are ways to add more flavor to your edit. On the GoStream, you'll find the auto button right next to the cut button, and this will give you an automatic fancy pants transition like a crossfade, wipe, or dip. These transitions take a user-defined amount of time, which can be anywhere from half a second to 8 seconds. The dip transition fades to a user-defined color, and wipe does a wipe, using your choice from 18 different patterns. Sorry, steak fans, there's no star wipe here. Transitions on the GoStream seem to have 256 steps. Here's the thing about that. If you're doing an 8-second transition at 60 frames per second, you're traveling for 480 frames. 256 is less than 480. This creates a staggered transition, which you can see clearly in the scopes as we go from color bars to black or white. The footage you're looking at was recorded in ProRes HQ via the HDMI out, so you're not seeing the effects of onboard H.264 and compression. These transitions were recorded at 60 frames per second, but are being played back at 30 to make the stutter easier to perceive. And you'll notice that it isn't a predictable stutter at all. If you look at the colors, they're jumping all over the place over the course of the transition. This means that in addition to the lack of sufficient frames to animate the 8-second mix, there is also an issue with image processing. So, how could you mitigate this? For one, if you cap your transition length at 4 seconds at 60p or 8 seconds at 30p, you have more steps in the transition than frames, and the staggering won't be an issue, but the compression skips in the color will be. To mitigate that, I wouldn't go above 1 or 2 second transitions for static graphics. And please don't make the mistake of thinking that this is going to affect your work on the GoStream very much at all. This is an incredibly minor concern, just something to be aware of. If you prefer a mix, dip, or wipe over a cut, you simply set your transition parameters in the menu, and then you can execute the cut either by tapping the auto button or controlling it yourself with the T-bar, which leads us to the T-bar. The T-bar. In general, we stay away from crossfades and wipes when we're cutting a live show, so it's rare we're using the auto transition in the first place. The T-bar does basically the exact same job as the auto transition, but you control how long it takes. We tried to replicate the transition step tests with the T-bar, but the reality was the action on the bar wasn't smooth enough for any meaningful test. We weren't able to do a transition longer than 1 or 2 seconds without the T-bar getting mucked and jamming a little bit before it continued its travel. For us, consistency is the North Star during a broadcast, so we'd likely lean towards the auto button for transitions over the T-bar. That said, there are creative applications possible with the T-bar that would be otherwise impossible. For example, if you're using a wipe, you can stop halfway through the transition for a DIY split screen. Or you could use the iris wipe to put someone's head in a toilet. We try not to speak in absolutes on this channel, as everyone's artistic ambitions and creative pipelines are different, but if you want to put someone's head in a toilet, the Osee GoStream would absolutely be my first choice over the ATEM Mini. There's a fourth button in the transition control block, and that is Preview. When this is engaged, the button turns red and shows the transition in the preview window instead of piping it to broadcast. Finally, there's an FTB button, and this stands for Fade to Black. Of course, you can define how slow that fade is, but you can also set the GoStream to kill the audio along with the picture when you hit Fade to Black. That covers the main video switching functionality, but just because the GoStream is a video switcher doesn't mean that it's lacking in the audio controls. As we get into the audio controls, we are getting into the higher functionality of the board. First, we'll look at the audio controls you have access to on the board, which are fairly limited. Then we'll get into the more nuanced controls, which are dependent on the menu system. This can be accessed by plugging the GoStream into a computer or having a monitor with your multi-view up. You'll notice that there are 8 buttons for deciding what audio you're adjusting: 2 for mic input, 4 for signal input, 1 for auxiliary, and 1 for program. If we select in 1, you'll see the button lights up, but nothing else happens. Once the channel is selected, you have the option to turn the audio for that feed on or off, or have audio follow video, or AFV. When you have AFV selected, the audio will automatically turn on when you cut to that input and turn off when you cut away. Finally, there's the program button, and this is where we hit a wall with what we can do entirely on the switchboard. Technically, you can use the knob to adjust the volume for the input you have selected, but you're setting yourself up for frustration because this is a free turning knob. It does not have min or max positions, so you won't know exact gain levels as you rotate it. To get the full information, you'll have to keep an eye on your info panel in the lower right of the multi-view. When you select a channel, it loads up the menu of changes you can make for that channel, including fader, balance, and input. When working with analog inputs, that is mic 1 and 2, you also have the option to delay the signal. Because audio requires so much less processing power than video, it has a tendency to move through the signal path faster and can wind up ahead of the picture. A bit of delay can clean that right up, and it's nice to have it on board. While the interface is clunky compared to the ATEM software controller, it's absolutely functional. The lack of onboard compression, noise reduction, and equalization means that there's going to be a low ceiling on how complex your mixes can be on this board, but it's a video switchboard. These levels of control are completely acceptable. Regarding the actual quality of the audio, we sent the same analog signal to both an ATEM and a GoStream and recorded it using the line level input on the boards. When we popped these recordings into a spectral frequency analyzer, what we found is that the recordings were almost identical. There were no noise bands present in one that were absent in the other. In terms of audio hardware and processing, the two boards appear almost identical. Macros. The GoStream allows you to program macros. You've got 8 memory banks, and these can record settings or keystrokes as defined by the user. Perhaps performed is a better word than defined, as you have to plan out your macro, engage the memory record function, perform it front to back without making any mistakes, and then cut recording. Functionally, it's the same as building a macro in the ATEM ecosystem. We have built macros for things like lower thirds or chroma keys, but we really don't rely on that in the field. When live switching, I feel like each button press introduces a little bit of risk. It's part of the fun of live streaming. Macros, though, are like pouring 10 gallons of risk into a one-button container. We've done it, and it has worked for us. Just remember to practice the macro a lot before you hit record, and test it even more before you go to air. If something goes wrong with a macro while you're live, you don't really get to blame the macro. If you're comfortable working in the companion app, that works with the GoStream. This is a better bit of software for building macros, as you can revise your command list easier than on board. Also, you can bake in user-defined pauses, which is one of the main reasons we avoid record and play macros. Sometimes you're executing a string of commands that requires buffers between executions to work correctly. And this is where something like Companion can offer functionality that the GoStream can't. While the GoStream Duet can be controlled by the Companion app, getting there can be a bit of a challenge. Here's how we got it to work for us on a Mac. First, go to the firmware update page on the Osee website, then download the Companion module. Go to your Applications folder and find the Companion app. Right-click it and click on Show Package Contents. Go to the subfolder Contents, Resources, Bundled Modules. Then copy and paste the GoStream folder you downloaded into the Bundled Modules folder. You'll have to put in your password for the copy to complete. At this point, we restart the computer just to let everything settle. Load up your Companion app and you should be able to add an Osee connection. Make sure that your IP address is correct and you're good to go. From there, you can add your buttons and control the GoStream via your Stream Deck. Next to the macro block is the menu knob and button, which we will come back to. But for now, we're going to look at record and playback. Not only does the GoStream come with built-in record, it also has playback. It's a great feature and one that is aggressively absent from the ATEM Mini line of switchers. One of the biggest hassles of working with ATEM Minis is that you have to take the drive off the board and plug it into a computer if you want to check the previous take. We assume that Blackmagic leaves this feature off because they don't want to cannibalize their HyperDeck line of products. That said, I think Osee made the right choice in including playback. It is really useful. At the top of the video, I said that the GoStream was going to become an essential part of our streaming kit. Here's how. We'll bring it on all of our streams to use as a dedicated playback device, a budget-friendly and extremely high-functioning HyperDeck. While its primary function on set would be playback, if anything should happen to our primary switcher, we could always use the GoStream as a backup and still get through the production without too much anxiety. So, let's take a look at how recording and playback work on the device. Record on the GoStream functions exactly as one would expect. You press record to record and stop to stop. One nice thing is that as soon as you cut on your record, you can access the file and play it back. This could be really useful for Zoom meetings. For example, at the top of the meeting, you could record a couple of minutes of you in a neutral pose, and in the event that you had to step away from the camera without leaving the meeting, you could play this file back on loop. For playback of your own files, first you compress your videos to H.264. Then you load your video files into the videos folder on your SD card. Pop the card into your GoStream and hold down the play button to bring up your menu of files. Use the menu knob to cycle through and then press it to load the video into playback. The GoStream automatically starts playback when you cut to the auxiliary input so you can load the file into preview, essentially keeping it on standby and knowing that when it's loaded, your audience will see playback from frame 1. Also, the GoStream only starts playback when your transition is complete. So if you use an auto fade or the T-bar, you'll fade over a still frame, kicking off playback when you're 100% transitioned to auxiliary. If you want playback to begin before the cut, you simply press play and then do your transition. While the file is playing back, you get a progress bar in your multi-view that lets you know how much of the file has elapsed and how much is left. We wanted to compare the record quality of the GoStream to that of the ATEM. Unfortunately, we weren't able to find identically matching bit rates when it came to record compression between the two devices, so what we compared were the highest quality and the lowest quality options on both boards. We did this by sending the exact same signal into an ATEM Mini and a GoStream and then loading that footage into Resolve. In our editing suite, we placed the different record files on top of the original file and could then quantify compression artifacts by switching the blend mode from normal to difference. We then added a contrast and desaturation filter to exaggerate the differences and make them easier to observe. What we found is that on the highest quality setting, the two boards compared fairly well. If you focus on the scopes, you'll see that the same frame from each board is relatively similar in how dissimilar it is from the original. While the amount of difference is similar, though, how it gets there is very different. The GoStream's compression artifacts come in the form of aggressive banding in the gradient of the sky. Compression artifacts are evident on the ATEM as well, but those come in the form of blocks more than bands. You can see a large collection of blocks around the model, while the rest of the sky has survived with relatively few scars. Something surprising about the GoStream is the priority that it gives to the shadows. The sky is getting chewed up pretty bad, but if you look at the model's back, you'll see more detail in the GoStream than on the ATEM, where the shadows are a muddy mess. The lowest quality settings predictably chewed the video to shreds on both boards. We won't dwell on this one for too long because they're both pretty awful, and if you're concerned about quality comparisons, you likely won't be spending too much time with this setting. The Osee is a little more wrecked than the ATEM, which could be good news. If you're concerned about card space, the Osee at its lowest setting should give you more record time because it's using a lower bit rate than the ATEM. Honestly, both are so bad, though, that I wouldn't use either of them for anything other than proof that the live edit happened. Finally, on the face, you have controls for key and downstream key. These controls will dovetail nicely into the menu system because turning on and off the key and the downstream key is as easy as can be. Understanding exactly what you're doing requires an understanding of the menu system. Tapping the key button loads your key into the preview window. Pressing the on-air button actually engages it for broadcast. The same is true with DSK. The key button gives you access to luma keying, chroma keying, pattern, and picture-in-picture. The DSK button gives you access to downstream keys. Just a quick note, in an odd bit of design, the Supersource is a preview cut button, but picture-in-picture is a keying function. I don't know if I agree with this choice, as I feel like picture-in-picture and Supersource are siblings, and the GoStream treats them like distant cousins. I'm guessing this was a way to give you one-button access to both on a board with limited buttons. To actually control any of the keying functions or the Supersource, though, you need to familiarize yourself with the menu system on the GoStream. That is done by tapping the menu button and using the menu knob to navigate. Let's get into those deeper menus. First up, Supersource. Supersource is much more limited than what you can build on the ATEM, but there is absolutely enough to get you across the finish line. Your Supersource has 2-up and a background, all of which can be user-defined. I've got the 2-up set to inputs 1 and 2, and the background set to auxiliary, which allows for video playback from the SD card. You have controls for mask and border, but not too much else. Like I said, it's enough to get you across the finish line. If you prefer ease of use at the cost of features, you are likely to find the GoStream more your style. If you want more options and enjoy mucking around with a denser tool set, the ATEM might be a better fit for your style. Either way, you're in good hands. Key type. There are 4 types of keys you can choose from on the GoStream: luma, chroma, pattern, and picture-in-picture, or PIP. We aren't going to go through all of them as it would take too much time, but I will demo the Luma key and the picture-in-picture. If you'd like to see a tutorial on chroma and pattern, leave a comment below and we will dive deeper. Luma key is really easy to set up on the GoStream. In the menu, you pick your source. In this case, I'm going to use input 1, which is my face. I'll set the key to auxiliary and pick a video file of animated fireworks, as this will have clearly defined highlights. Now, when we cut to input 2 and we put our key on air, you'll see that it's showing my face where the sky is dark and showing the board where the fireworks are light. Applications of things like Luma and chroma key are only as limited as your imagination. And the quality of the extraction. We toyed around with both kinds of keys on the GoStream with some lower thirds that we built in Keynote, and while they worked, I can't say that we got our keying to where we were absolutely happy. It was functional for sure, but maybe not quite ready for broadcast.
Hey guys, just a quick interrupt on the narration. While we were doing post-production, we updated the firmware of the board, and it looks like Osee has made improvements to both the chroma and Luma key algorithms. It's still not perfect, a little bit, quite literally, rough around the edges, but absolutely serviceable.
In the event that you don't want to broadcast your key straight away, you can always load an input into preview, and instead of tapping on air, you can tap key, which will do the exact same build I just showed you, but in the preview window. If you like what you see, you can cut or fade and it will become the program. Let's talk about picture-in-picture. If you want to do picture-in-picture on the GoStream, you have to go back up to the key type and change it to pip. This one is a bit simpler than building a key, as you simply define the channel you want as the pip and you're off to the races. You have control over everything you need for a pip, including size, position, mask, and border. Just like the Supersource, it's enough to get you across the finish line. Downstream Key. The Downstream Key is great for loading in a lower third or something similar that you want to slap on top of your broadcast. For this demonstration, we have a simple animated lower third that we're generating with Keynote being piped into input 4. We're using input 4 as the source and the key. Using the Control tab under DSK, we can fine-tune the mat to get rid of everything that's zero value black, but retain everything that's anything other than zero value black. As with the Luma key, be ready to noodle around. There's an art to the math involved in keying. Transitions. Your transition menu gives you options for your different types of transitions, including how long your mix takes, dip rate and color, and of course, the rainbow of different wipes you can choose from. Stream. Streaming is a little bit unwieldy controlling everything on board. You can input your stream key, but the interface is terrible. If you're going to input a stream key, we highly recommend that you come off board and do it through their desktop app, which is functional, but lacking in polish. Setting up a stream is a very simple process through the GoStream desktop app. First, set your stream to the platform you want to be broadcasting to. Then copy your stream key into the key field. Turn on your stream and then turn on your live output and congratulations, you're broadcasting. If you don't have access to a computer, you can set up the stream key through the board, but this is a bit more laborious of a process, requiring you to enter each character using the rotating knob. Functional, but not ideal. A quick sidebar about the desktop app. While it is easier to control the GoStream using a computer because you have access to a keyboard and a mouse, you will not find any tools in the desktop app that don't already exist on the board. And this is where the GoStream suffers the most in comparison to the ATEM. There is no broader ecosystem. When we hit record on the extreme ISO, all of our cameras roll raw automatically. We're able to shade our cameras from the board and dial in compression on the audio. We correct our edits by popping the board-generated project into Resolve and tweaking cuts. You get none of that here, and it feels very restricting. The ATEM truly comes alive when it's integrated into the broader Blackmagic workflow. The GoStream is a board that functions well, but it functions alone. Settings. Finally, there's the Settings tab. This is a hodgepodge of things that didn't fit elsewhere. We won't go through them item by item here because it's mostly self-explanatory. You can do stuff like set your board language, format your SD card, and check the firmware version here. Conclusion. So, is the GoStream Duet an ATEM killer? No. They are simply too late to market for any chance of that. There are a good dozen features that I really like, though, that Blackmagic should consider implementing. While Blackmagic has a terrific product vertical that you can climb up, there is one massive gap in their product line, and that's the transition from HDMI to SDI. When you're in the ATEM Mini ecosystem, you're either all HDMI or all SDI. Osee closes that gap and allows you to easily mix cameras with HDMI or SDI without asking you to buy a pile of decimators. The record and playback functionality is beautifully implemented and effortless to use. The T-bar isn't without its uses, and I imagine some people will love it. That said, I'm more into the power button, and I don't mean that as a dig on the T-bar. I really wish there was a power switch on the ATEM, but it's simply not there, and I will never understand that decision. But really, the number one thing that separates this device from the ATEM is the ability to control every last feature from the board itself. When you look at the ATEM Mini Extreme, you have 500,000 buttons, but if you want to change the name of your project, you need to plug the board into a computer, download the control software, and pluck through all the menus. Osee solved this entire problem and hundreds more with a single button and a knob. So, who is this device for? Well, us, for one. The Playback makes it an immediate replacement for laptops when we're doing shows. And if you've watched the video this far, it's probably also for you. I mean, you made it here, there must be something about the GoStream that speaks to you. Aside from you and me, there are other applications we'd strongly consider the GoStream for. If we were building out Zoom rooms for corporate clients, this would actually be a top contender for an input hub because of the simple fact that the client could do setting changes without needing the device to be connected to a computer. Similarly, it's easy to imagine this being terrific for academic applications, both in classroom labs for students studying media production and for teachers who want to wrangle multiple inputs for in-class screens or a study-from-home broadcast. If you're a solo streamer, this could be a powerful little device and feels like it would be the next logical step when you've outgrown OBS. If you work in live media and you're hoping to grow a business, I might recommend an ATEM as there's more room for vertical growth. But if you're a solo streamer, this actually might be a better fit than Blackmagic's offerings because, while the GoStream lacks the broader ecosystem of the ATEM, it's more feature-rich straight out of the box, and all those features are easily accessed from the board. But hey, enough of our opinions. Have you cracked into the GoStream? What are your thoughts? How would you use this device if you had one? Or if you have one, how are you currently using it? Please leave a comment below. And as always, thank you so much for watching. Now, please close YouTube and go use a T-bar to put a head in the toilet.
And hey, you get a bonus test because right now I am feeding a Shure Beta 58A directly into the board for the record so you can hear how that sounds, and it looks like I left the lower third up. Fantastic work.